So we are going to get started. And like I said, the first few speeches are planned out, but I will indicate when we are ready for anybody. So I'd like to start. First, I'm going to call this debate to order on the resolution resolved. America's local governments should defund police departments and support alternative programs for public safety. And so I'm looking for a first speech in the affirmative. And I'm going to call on Derek Steele. Derek, go ahead and unmute yourself and give us your speech.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. My name is Derek Steele. I am a Black man who lives in Inglewood, California. I am a father to two beautiful young Black girls, the husband to a fantastic Black wife, and we as a Black family are in the state of California, and it's been a long journey for us to actually get here. I am actually speaking in the affirmative of actually defunding the police. And here's the reason why. Being from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, born and raised, I am a diehard Steeler fan. People who live in Pittsburgh, we love our teams, right? And that's one of the commonalities. But I'll be honest, one of the things that's also a very effective understanding about Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, is that it's very, very Black and white. And I mean that. Like, the parts of the city that are white, and the parts of the city that are Black are Black. And the way that the police have operated from my purview, being someone who's actually had the privilege of going to a school to learn German, which means that I had a very diverse high school, and seeing how some of my white peers, being that I played in musicals. I was 4-year senior and doing musicals, so I had a lot of white friends, but I was also one of the star players on the football team, so I had a lot of Black friends. And seeing how I was treated by the police in my time growing up in the city of Pittsburgh, really striking a fear in me and how I actually interact and how they show up in my life. I mean, when I say fear, I mean, anytime I see a police officer, I tense. I start to sweat. My heart pounds, because I've seen peers who have actually died at the hands of the police. I have personally witnessed being mistreated by the police, but then on the other side, seeing some of my white friends be able to speak up and say whatever they want to say to the police officers and never have any type of warning. Now let's fast forward a little bit in my life, where I moved to Baltimore, Maryland, which is a majority Black city. And my thought was, well, being that this is a Black city and seeing that there will probably be a police force that reflects that city, the treatment of the people will probably be different. Nah, it's really the same. When you look at the cases like Freddie Gray dying at the hands of police officers in the back of the paddy wagon, and countless others who don't actually get included in these stories because they're not the superstars. They're not the stories that rise to the occasion. And so after I left Baltimore, where I went to college, seeing that the experience was still the same, and then moving to California and still seeing these stories pop up all over the country, I saw the reason why that fear is actually in my heart. So what can we do? Well, we actually need to be starting to fund projects and opportunities that actually are beneficial to community. It's no reason why police officers should actually be the ones who are responding to mental health cases or actually showing up when there's domestic violence. Why don't we have counselors? Why don't we have the things that used to actually be available to families back in the day, or actually available to families who live in the suburbs, right? And majority white communities. Like, we're not asking for something that is unusual or unique. We're actually just
30 seconds. Go ahead and unmute yourself and keep going.
I apologize about that. We're actually asking for the treatment to happen the same way in our communities, the same way that they do in majority white communities, and the way that the police show up for them. I mean, I'll end with this. And if you look at the history of police in this country, it it really was start and the retrieval of slaves for black people that in it, right? So that's where the police even started in the first place, of capturing runaway slaves and bringing them back to the plantation, right? But I also understand that the thing that most of my white brothers and sisters and counterparts have that we don't have the ability to live through is the will for ignorance, and it's not your fault, because if you were never witness to these things and you never had to deal with these things, then how would you ever know what it actually is like to live in that type of experience? So I'm excited to be a part of this conversation, because I want to be able to bring that context to the discussion to determine the reasons why we should defund police in certain communities, and the reasons why, and the stories that are connected to it, and the historical context that's connected to it as well, to be able to make this a well-rounded conversation, if you will have it. Thank you very much for your time.
All right. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Jazz hands for our very brave first speaker. Yes, thank you. Alrighty. Are there questions for the speaker? If so, go ahead and raise your hand in the Manage Participants pane. And just as a reminder, Manage Participants is a button at the bottom of your screen. And at the bottom of, if you click on that, opens a pane. At the bottom of that, there's a raised hand function. Good. Okay. Let's start with Kathy from Orange County, California. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Kathy.
Okay, and I'm new to this, but it is a question I have, so I'll address Madam Chair that I'm
very good
to know the perspective that hearing that side is I'm on board, and yet I find that the term defund police, it hit me. At first, I had to do a little bit more research as to what it meant when I saw the signs, and I think that it's putting off a lot of people or scaring a lot of people. And I'm wondering if maybe you can have,
if he can have,
if well, you
or if we can have, yeah,
can have our speaker address maybe some thoughts on the slogan defund police and what that's doing to some people.
Great. All right, Mr. Steele, go for it.
Fantastic. I think that is a phenomenal question for a space like this, right? And I appreciate you asking it. When we say defund the police, you have to think about what are the police actually funded to do? Now historically, those funds have risen 3 years at a time, depending on what the relationship is for a city and their police department, or the union that negotiated their contract. But they end up asking for more services, right? So the police department in LA is $3 billion or more. And when you look at their budget, I'll say it like this: a nonprofit organization, if you look at the life cycle of a nonprofit organization, one that's actually really effective that type of organization is to do in the community, right? The police printing and ink. So when I say defund the police, you know, when you start thinking about the different types of services that these organizations, like the Social Justice Learning Institute or many others, are doing in community and actually being effective in the work that they're doing to help transform the lives of the people that they're impacting, why are we not using that money to actually support those organizations that can help transform our communities, rather than having police officers just policing across the board, right? So it's not defund them and end the whole process of policing. We actually want to do more with community and with the funding that we're using for police officers.
Alrighty, we will take one more question. And just as a reminder, questioners can take up to 1 minute to ask their question, and there's up to 1 minute to answer the question. So
I'll be better and be brief. Sorry about that.
Well, you weren't here. It's not your fault. So yes, that's why I'm mentioning this now. All right. So for the other question, one other note, just while we're paused, Zoom has this annoying habit of changing its processes constantly. And the way that the process is right now, I can't unmute you. I can mute you, but I cannot unmute you. So I'm going to need to mute you to say you have 10 seconds left or whatever, and then you have to unmute yourself. Apparently this is supposed to like change back in a couple days, but for now we're just going to have to work with it. And so I will probably interrupt you at some point to give you a time warning, and then you're going to have to unmute yourself. Sorry about that. So for the other question, let's go with, let's go with Mackenzie Crozier.
No, thank you, Madam Chair. I mostly had a question about what other kinds of services we would fund instead of funding the police. So one of the major things that people have argued for is like funding social workers, but one of the concerns I have about funding social workers is that they also have a pattern of like discriminating against the Black community. So how do we ensure that we're also making sure that like these services that are replacing the police are also not discriminating?
All right. Go for it, Derek.
So great question. And in short, I think the starting place is really understanding why there are the types of issues that are in community the way they are in the first place. And then you have to start looking at the social determinants of health, the social determinants of environment, social economical conditions in the community, and what type of services can we use in order to solve those problems, right? And when you're looking at it from that standpoint, you'll begin to look at the other types of organizations and types of services that we can provide.
Sorry, Derek. I just would ask everybody to stay on mute when you're not called on. And so go ahead and unmute yourself, Derek, and keep going.
No problem. So when you look at it from the framework of how did these communities get into the different conditions that people are actually dealing with on a day-to-day basis, and what type of organizations or services can help solve those problems, it's not just social work. We actually have to do the deep diving into really solving fundamental problem we just basically thrown the police at, right? So starting the conversation around completely solving the social conditions of cases and injuries.
Alrighty, wonderful. Excellent questions and excellent answers. With that, the speaker is thanked. And I'd like us to give jazz hands for Mr. Steele and for our questioners. Well done, everyone. So a couple more housekeeping notes, then we'll go to our first negative speaker. The first is if our whips may be trying to chat to you. And so I recommend that you keep your chat function open, or at least just pay attention to it. And that's in the same bar at the bottom of your screen as manage participants. It's actually right next to it. So we might be trying to reach out to you there. And then the other point is, this isn't intuitive, but speakers also need to use the third person. So if you've just given a speech and you're answering a question, you also need to say, the questioner said this, I'd like, she might wonder this, that kind of thing. So just a couple little things. And yeah, sorry about all the like, do you want to unmute yourself pop-ups? They're annoying, but we'll work with them. And yeah, all right. So we are now moving on to our first speech in the negative. Please raise your hand if you'd like to give one. And we're gonna go with Karen Ward. Karen, please unmute yourself.
Okay, hi, my name is Karen Ward, and I've actually been retired from police work for almost 30 years now. And when I see what's happening in our country, I can only thank God that I don't have that job now. When I see the outcry to defund police departments, whether it be less money allocated for hiring new officers or for less money for training or equipment, just gives me a lump in the pit of my stomach. What kind of alternative programs would these local governments implement in place of police? Like I said, I've been out nearly 30 years, and I probably wouldn't even be able to fathom what the police officers are dealing with now. We had armed robberies, but we didn't give much thought to the bad guys being on drugs and wearing bulletproof vests and having automatic weapons. And we had burglaries in progress, and we didn't think a whole lot, again, about drug-impaired bad guys with automatic weapons. We stopped cars for traffic violations, and although you'd never know that if the occupant or occupants had just committed a crime, you did your best to be aware of the potential that that could happen. And you generally would encounter people, though, that were hoping to buffalo their way through and escape. And now they seem to be opting for a violent encounter or shooting their way out. And then there's one of the most potentially dangerous calls, and that's a domestic dispute. Historically, and even now, these have the possibility to be the most volatile, and the public wants to send what? A family counselor? So now the officers are responding to a call. They really don't know what the situation is until they get there. And now there's some kind of family counselor that's going to need protection as well. So who calls these folks, and who is it? When do they get called? And is there a reason the police are out there in the patrol cars to get someplace fast and be able to assess the situation as soon as possible? It seems likely that the people that are, or it seems to be that the people that are in the bigger cities are the ones that are calling for the defunding, yet that's precisely where they're needed the most. And if you've never needed a cop, maybe it's a lot easier to want to get rid of some or all of them until you're the one that needs the police. There's auto accidents. People are trapped, they're hurt, somebody might be under the influence, vehicles need towed. It's generally cops on the scene that assess that situation. They call for backup or support services, not to mention writing up the investigation and the accident report. And then there's one last thing that's got a lot of current attention, and I guess this could be an entire debate, but the qualified immunity. This is designed to protect all but the plainly incompetent or those knowingly who violate the law. And I can say unequivocally that there are people who are willing to blame the police for just about anything. And if they thought that they could sue them personally, I have no doubt that there would be lawyers ready to take the case, valid or not. And how long do these lawyers and judges take to make their decisions? Weeks or months? And you've heard before you judge a person, you walk a mile in their shoes. So when you're Monday morning quarterbacking a police shooting, try to imagine running a city block, because that's about where your heart rate is.
30 seconds, and go ahead and unmute yourself and keep going.
So you've got your heart is pounding, and let's say it's daylight and not dusk or dark, and the person that's confronting you has one of these.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me, which one is real and which one's a toy? Realize that you have a fraction of a second to make that determination. So are you going to shoot them, or are you going to wait to see what they do? Thank you.
All right, very good. Yes, jazz hands for our brave first negative. Thank you. She's a pinch hitter, by the way, so extra jazz hands for that. And are there questions for the lady? I see Jonathan Tweet. Go ahead.
Hey, thanks. I really appreciate the real life stories, both the first speaker and Chair, the new speaker. And Madam Chair, I would like to know whether our current speaker can name any concrete reforms that police unions or police departments or cities should enact.
All right. Go ahead.
Madam Chair, I don't have enough time in my 1 minute, but going back to the time that I was working, we had just different community programs that formed relationships with the people that were in our community. I was, at the time they called them crime prevention officers. There were 4 of us, and on a weekend at a slow period of time, we would go out and do surveys of people's homes or businesses where, we'd give them tips on safety, either it be in their, in their own residence or private tips on safety. We would go into different schools and do programs. And just in the area that you patrol, if you get to know the people in the businesses and you get to know the kids that are hanging out on the street corners, you just have a rapport with those people, and they respect you a little bit more and you respect them, and just you find it, it's a lot easier.
All right, wonderful. We'll take one more question. Let's go with Meg. No last name, just Meg.
Just
Go ahead and
Meg
unmute yourself.
McLaughlin. Thank you so much. I'm from Washington, D.C., originally from California. Madam Chair, I'm interested whether, I come from a business background, and my company, when we would send a group out to work with a client, it would be a team made up of team members, each of whom had specific skills to meet the needs of that particular client and the challenge that they had at the time. I'm curious whether the speaker could envision, a future type of police force that wasn't just, one size fits all, but that had police officers who were trained in social work, and police officers who were trained in homeless issues, and police officers who were trained in mental health issues, so that instead of the police feeling like they would have to protect the social worker or the mental health worker who was coming out with them on a call, they were a team, and each of them had a specific skill, and depending on the call, they could react together.
10 seconds. Unmute yourself and keep going.
Sorry, just wondering if that's something the speaker could envision, something that kind of a team orientation.
Okay.
Madam Chair, in all due respect to the question, that is just about, I would think, about impossible. Anybody that gets into a police car, they better be able to be trained and be able to use a weapon that they're issued. And we can refer people to social services after the fact, but police just actually never know what they're going to get. Even with the call going through a 911 center, you get sent there, you might have an idea of what's happening, but you really don't know until you get there. So it's just that there's the team approaches, I would think would be pretty unlikely to happen.
All right. And with that, the speaker is thanked. Thank you, and good questions and good answers once again. I would now like to call on our second affirmative speaker of the night. So go ahead and raise hands if you want to give an affirmative speech. And I think we're going to go with Amir. Amir, go ahead.
What's up? How y'all doing? My name is Amir Zendanam. Pleasure to meet y'all. Thank y'all for being here. Madam Chair, thank you so much for having me. I am the CEO and formulation scientist of an optimal health company called Specker. We focus on CBD and other optimal health-based ingredients lists. And I have an argument that supports defunding the police, however, in a way where I believe that everybody can find a little bit of common ground here. And I just want to ask y'all a few questions just to think about. When we talk about socialized healthcare and socialized education, we're immediately painting a picture of something negative, inefficient, high cost. So the way that I look at this issue is from a very economic standpoint. And from my studies of economics, what I've learned, and what you all probably know as well, is that monopoly services do not provide the most efficient goods and services for humanity. And when I think defund the police, what I'm thinking of is to transition a lot of that money into the market so a lot of these services can be handled by the market economy. Now, we see many private security firms in neighborhoods that patrol extremely efficiently. They keep things real safe. So in my mind, I believe that we should start transitioning to a more market-based model, because right now we're in an environment where so many non-violent offenses have become criminalized that it puts the police that we have today in today's environment in high-risk situations, because they are tasked as a job to criminalize things like cannabis. And when we look at the war on drugs and the cannabis arguments, we're seeing cannabis being legalized all across the country right now, being regulated by the government. And the way I see it is that, well, if that's the case and so much money is being used by police to enforce things like petty cannabis crimes, then if we just took funding away from certain things like cannabis enforcement, then that technically defunds the police drastically to an era where, you know, Karen, I believe you said about 30 years ago.
She said.
Yeah. So,
she said.
Yeah, she said about 30 years ago you were a police officer, and
she was.
She
sorry,
was. Yes.
Yes.
I gotta learn these little styles here. Sorry.
Yeah.
But that in that time there was not this much money from local, state, and federal agencies flooding into the local police departments. And from my take on it, you know, growing up in America, I was born and raised in California, and I got a firsthand look on being born in the 80s and seeing how the police force just started getting more and more money. So, you know, another thing that I want to discuss is this community model that people keep talking about. And I think that the community model has a very bad rap because
30 seconds, unmute yourself and keep going. Love it.
So the way that I look at a community-based model is that we do community business-based models. So what we're doing is very similar to the status quo that we already have in many communities across America who hire private security companies that many of them are former military and former police officers, and they work highly efficiently. So I believe that we should be transitioning more to this style, and I think that this is a position that we can all find common ground on. And if we do that, because right now there's a bunch of different arguments, but my goal in life is always to find common ground with everybody, because we can always find something that we agree on. Even if we disagree 99% of the time, there's still 1% of something we can all agree on. So let's focus on that. So thank you all so much. It's a pleasure being here.
Oh, hooray. Jazz hands. Yes, so creative and so, yes, energetic. I love it.
Thank you.
Yes. So are there questions for the speaker? And the answer is yes, there are. There are lots of hands. Let's start with Sam and Kelly from Minnesota.
Hello, Madam Speaker and everybody. I am just interested in a couple of questions to the speaker. The first one is that should we follow the same model of privatization of the use of force? Because basically we're talking about privatization of use of force here. So is that model would be applicable to the military, for example, as well? And the other question is, I can't see the connection between defunding and making something legal. So is that more of an issue of legalizing or finding the legal framework within which the police can perform do the things that non-violent, deal with actual violent crimes as opposed to non-violent crimes? So is that more of a legal issue as opposed to a funding issue? Thank you.
All right, great. Mm-hmm.
Fantastic questions. So yes, I believe that if in our minds we already believe that the market provides the best quality goods and services for the most affordable price at the safest rates possible, then moving into a privatized model over the next few decades, as you know, we're going through this new awakening where so many people across the world are connected through things like Zoom that we're on right now. Like, this is amazing that we have hundreds of people here, you know, so this is shifting the conversation in a way where, well, if, you know, I want to see a model where I can go choose security on Yelp. You know, not tomorrow, but this is a business model that should be built. As Americans, we are the leaders on the free market system, and I believe that we should continue growing on our culture of dominating free market activism and leading the way for that model. Now, another thing you asked.
Hey, Amir, I'm sorry about this, but that actually is your time. So you can have one sentence. It can be a long sentence, but that's all.
So the other question was, yes, if we legalize these industries and these nonviolent crimes, what happens is the federal government and the state government does not fund the local governments to enforce those laws. And that is typically what is happening right now. One sentence, two sentences?
Well done. Very impressive.
Thank you all so much. I appreciate you.
Yeah. Yeah. And so with that, the speaker is thanked. I really wish I could call on all of you. I know that a lot of people have, I'm sure, very good questions for Amir, but yeah, unfortunately, we just have to keep chugging. So jazz hands for Amir one more time. Yes. Yes. Very good. And we're now going to go to our second negative speaker of the evening. And so I'd like y'all to feel free to raise hands for that. And we're going to go with Kristen. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, and do I have 3 minutes or 4 minutes?
4.
4, okay. Good, then I'll take a couple minutes and introduce myself. So why do I care about this? I have a background in economics and I ended up in population health. So my current job is looking at large populations of people and trying to decide how we can help large populations of people feel healthiest or be healthiest. Before I did this, when I was in college, I worked for 6 months as a social worker in Cabrini Green. And my kids were the poorest of the poor. And I had one kid who couldn't go home that night because there was shooting in her building. I had another 14-year-old girl who missed a week of the program because she stabbed somebody in a fight and was in jail. So I have those 2 pieces in my life. And I have dogs. I also have dogs. Sorry, what a Zoom moment. So in population health, we look at evidence to answer questions. You know, the question of what do you do for a heart attack, or what do you do to treat COVID-19 most effectively? And we have to turn to evidence to determine what we do best. And if we're going to look at evidence with regard to answering this question, I would take this question: do we defund the police? And ask 3 questions. First of all, do we need policing? And then if we decide we do need policing, what policing works? And then the corollary question, what doesn't work? So do we need policing? Well, somebody did an experiment for us, so we don't need to try this. In Montreal in 1969, the police went on strike. And I just want to read a super brief paragraph. So the police went on strike at 11:20 a.m. By noon, the first bank had been robbed. Taxi drivers burned down the garage of a limousine service they competed with. A provincial police officer was killed. Rioters broke into several hotels, and a doctor killed a burglar in his home. By the end of the day, 6 banks had been robbed and 100 shops had been looted. So they tried it. That was for 24 hours. I don't think we need to try it. We do need some sort of a police force, some sort of law and order. So, okay, if we decide based on that evidence that we do need policing, what policing works? And there's more evidence that we can turn to for that. We talked a lot about how police officers shouldn't be doing the little things. Well, that's called broken windows policing. And there's not a lot of good evidence that I found to show that that sort of police officers on every, stopping people for broken taillights and stopping people for rolling through stop signs, that kind of policing doesn't really make communities safer in a big way. So, how do we determine what we want police to do? Well, we've talked about maybe some additional training. We could look at that. We have found that police presence in what are called high crime neighborhoods, like the neighborhood my kids lived in, just having more police presence there lowers crime. They don't even have to do anything, just having them walk around. You had talked about possibly privatizing the police force.
He had.
He
had talked about it.
The good speaker had talked about privatizing the police force. My kids back in Chicago, they couldn't afford anything. They couldn't afford to hire anybody. And they're one of those high crime neighborhoods where having lots of police officers just walking around helped. We talked about the fact that police force with the slave hunters, and so it's inevitably corrupt just from the
30 seconds. Go ahead and unmute yourself and keep going.
Thank you. I would encourage the audience to go on Snopes.com. That is a part of truth, that's part of the history, but it's not all of the history. So what we need to do is go into the police force, find out what works, find out what doesn't. Keith Ellison, our Attorney General here in Minnesota, he has a plan that he created before Mr. Floyd was ever murdered. It's a plan that needs to be seen, because his whole plan, and he took a year developing it, was how to improve policing in our communities. And nobody's paying any attention to Mr. Ellison's plan, because it's one of those boring but important things that doesn't, you know, it doesn't raise people's emotions as much, but it's got solutions that I think should be looked at.
All right, very good.
And thank you for being here, everybody. You're awesome for being here and talking about this. I love you. Yay.
Totally.
For the people.
Totally. Yeah. So many. We're at 206 right now.
Yeah, that's great.
So are there questions for the speaker? Go ahead and raise your hand if so. Let's go with Rachel Becker.
Hi, Rachel.
I hope you can hear me, and you might hear my baby in the background. So if so.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Great. I am a social worker, so I have lots of thoughts on.
Hey, sister. Yes.
And my question for the speaker has to do with two models I've run across for redoing policing or doing policing differently. I'm curious the speaker's thoughts on them. The first one comes out of Eugene, Oregon, where about 20% of 911 calls get rerouted to a crisis center made up of crisis workers that are in fact behavioral health workers. So the calls are carefully screened and then determined whether they go to the police or to this other intervention team that is specifically trained for the work. The other model is similar to, I think, what the speaker was suggesting around just adding even numbers of police can actually.
10 seconds, unmute yourself and keep going.
It comes out of Camden, New Jersey, where they radically redid their police system in a way that included increasing the numbers of police but training them differently.
Yes. Yes.
Connections. So I'm curious thoughts on either of those.
Yeah, I love both of those ideas. I think those are nuanced, evidence-based, and thoughtful solutions. 20% of calls were routed to the crisis center, and that probably very appropriately, but not 100%. So 80% of the calls still needed police officers. I love the Camden, New Jersey model. I think it's really brilliant because they did a cultural change in that police force, as well as some changes in the way that that the community was policed. So they worked on the police officers, and they also worked on the way that the police interacted with the community. I think they're great ideas. And I think that these are ideas that we can all look at. I think we should also look at giving police officers kind of the fireman model of, 10 days on and 10 days off, or the teacher's model of 9 months on and 3 months off. I mean, they need a chance to preserve their humanity from some of the, always intense interaction with the community and some of the worst aspects of our community that can reduce their humanity. I think another thing that I would love to see, Rachel, in addition to the two.
You have 10 seconds left, but go ahead. You have to unmute yourself.
So in addition to what Rachel said, oh shoot, I lost it, I forgot it. Oh yes, I know what it was. So Derek Chauvin, the man that murdered George Floyd, he had so many infractions. He should have been fired long ago, and we need to change that aspect of our police unions as well. That, I mean, if I had made mistakes 17.
I'm gonna cut you off, sorry. Go ahead. I love the enthusiasm though, it's wonderful. All right, so we're gonna take a second question, and Jim Masiak from, I hope I'm not butchering that, from Austin, Texas. Go ahead. Can unmute yourself, Jim, and ask your question. Jim, you're still muted.
There we go. Got it.
Oh, good. There we go. Great.
So Madam Chair, I appreciate both this Christian's comments that she made, as well as Rachel, and the overall comments about evidence-based activities. And to be honest, I think we've all read about those for a long time. So my question to the speaker is, given all this good best practices that are extremely effective and demonstrated in several cities around the country, why don't cities adopt these plans?
All right.
I have no idea. I don't know. I mean, probably because nobody has asked them to. You know, have you called your mayor and said, can we get a different culture in the police officers? I mean, you know, the fact that buildings burned in Minnesota and all over the United States is terrible, awful, horrible. It happened. We can't go back and do it differently. So let's use this moment in time when people are paying attention and make some necessary changes.
All righty. Bravo. With that, the speaker's thanked. Jazz hands for
you. But keep
Ms.
the police,
Carlson.
because don't do Montreal. We're not going to be Montreal 1969. We do still need police.
Okay, can't do that. But anyway, I understand that it was an important point. Cool. Alrighty. So bravo, everyone. I think this is, y'all are doing just a fabulous job so far. Very good speeches, very good questions, very good answers. And we are now moving to, well, we may have one more planned speech. I'd like to see, is Nell Glover here? He was for a while, but
I'm here.
Have moved. You are great. Okay. So then I'd like to, I'm looking for an affirmative speech, and I'm going to call on you. So you just muted yourself, unfortunately.
How about now?
That's much better.
Okay.
Go ahead.
A few things were said. I'm going to try this. I think Kathy, I completely agree with Kathy. I think they should change the name from defund, because I don't think that's the thing to do. I think we should reallocate some funds. I think McKinsey made a statement about biased social workers, and that's training. Everyone has biases, so that's training. But I believe we should reconstruct our policing. My position to defund the police department isn't about punishing our valiant police officers. We have nearly 1 million police officers in this country, and we have, I don't know how many that are just real a-holes. But you have a 90-something percent, 96, 97% that are good people. You got to understand that. We got to understand that. The emotions have people wanting to do something that may not be necessary. Maybe we need to tweak it. We definitely need to make some adjustments, but we can't get rid of our police department. So I disagree with the whole comment defunding the police department. I agree with Amir and his comment that we have a lot of crimes that are, you know, and maybe we should take some resources away from that by decriminalizing some things such as marijuana and those things. I think he's correct in that. And that'll leave us money, but we can't, the thing that we don't pay attention to in the context of defund the police officer is we have brothers and sisters that won't be able to feed themselves because they won't have a job. You can't do that. You can't penalize one person to straighten out somebody else. So we can't practice that because we don't want that practice against us. So you can't practice what you don't want done to yourself. I think our objective should be to create a productive, caring, crime-free society. Euphoria, but that's the objective. That should be the objective. Turn our society into a kinder people and turn our police officers into peace officers. We have to take, we're going to always have to have a violent response team of officers. We can't stop people from doing silly stuff that harms us, hurts us, and we're going to have armed officers with the grit to come back and, hey, fight for us. We got to, so we can't get rid of the police department. You know, we need to make some adjustments. We need to make some tweaks. I think we have to work as a coalition. I understand what Karen is saying. When you pull up to that stop that's supposed to be peaceful and these guys go crazy, you have to be able to defend yourself. You have to, you know. I don't agree with Amir in his thought that we should have privatized the police department. The police officers are heroes. You can't pay a person to be a hero. It has to be something that comes from within inside of them. So we have to maintain pretty much kind of what we're doing. I just think we need to allocate our money to do some other things as well. I think we need to recreate some of the programs that we have that are not working, take money from that as well, and create programs that do work. When I grew up, we had auto mechanics, we had construction in junior high school, you know? And so by the time I was 15, I had my own little rotor-rooter business at 15, because in junior high school, I learned how to do plumbing. So, and it also perks the interest of the children at a young age in what direction they may want to take their life. When you realize an electrician makes $95 an hour, it's not a bad job. So a lot of the things that are going on in the communities where you see high crime, it's not because the people are bad people. The people are doing bad things, but it's poverty. Okay, that doesn't excuse bad behavior. So when we're policing our police, which we must do, we must.
30 seconds, go ahead and unmute and keep going.
We have to take the time and police our children, police our adults, and we need classes on how to deal with people as our police officers, treat the people like their own family. Sometimes you have to spank your family across the butt. It happens. Teach our citizens how to interact with the police. It's not just one way. Both sides have to learn how to interact with one another so that there's mutual respect. If you did something wrong, you're gonna go to jail. You're not gonna get killed if you submit, hopefully. The awful things we see are not done by police officers. They're done by awful people parading as police officers. They're done by awful people parading as police officers. One more thing. When you saw there were looters and protesters, protesters are not looters, and looters are not protesters. One is complaining, hey, cut it out. The other one's looking to take something that doesn't belong to him. And we can't say that's cool either. So we have to look at ourselves and take our responsibilities and ask our brothers and sisters that protect us to do the same. Thank you.
All righty, jazz hands for sure. Bravo. Are there questions for the speaker? I thought I saw one from Derek Steele. Derek, did you have a question? Go ahead and unmute yourself if so.
Yes.
Great.
I just wanted to ask really briefly, what about the police officer who killed Tamir Rice, who just arrived in like within 12 seconds of him arriving, he was out of park playing by himself with a toy gun. He shot. What about the gentleman who just got shot and killed in Atlanta? You know, the good policing, he said he could just walk home, and they didn't allow him to walk home. They tried to arrest him and ended up shooting and killing him. Same thing with what happened to George Floyd, which we haven't really talked about a lot, but 8 minutes and 46 seconds of having your knee on somebody's neck and all the other police officers that were around him standing there and letting it happen. Like it was all good. Like, I feel like
10 seconds, unmute and keep going.
I feel like I hear what you're saying, but the things that are actually happening in these communities are not jiving directly with the point of view that you're bringing to the table. So
he's bringing to the table.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, that he is bringing to the table.
There you go.
Can the speaker please speak towards that end when we keep seeing these types of things over and over and over again, particularly in communities of color, specifically Black communities?
All right, Mr. Glover.
Oh, I totally agree with you that it's too much.
Sorry, you have to agree with him. It's still in third person. Go for it.
Derek, I totally agree with you.
No. I'm sorry. I mean, you have to say, Madam Chair, I agree with the questioner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with the questioner that these things that are going on are horrible. Always have been horrible. We could say, I mean, the thing is, these are pieces of fecal. These people are pieces of fecal. And I totally agree with you. It's happening in our community. So we're addressing it now. The sad thing is that it wasn't until we saw an actual execution on television that sparked this. But whatever brought us to this point, we're making plays now, and that's where we have to come from. Because if we talk about what happened, bro, we're gonna get angry for what? Because anger doesn't solve things. Action solves things, you know. So I agree with you. It's horrible what's going on in our community. Born and raised in Los Angeles, went through when drugs came here, never sold drugs. And hey, we got to make a change. But yesterday is not going to solve today. Today solves tomorrow.
All right. Further questions? Jeffrey, I think it's Lightman. Been waiting a while. Go ahead and ask your question. Oh, you need to unmute yourself.
I wanted to pick up on something that Ned said about changing the name from defund. People can't have a conversation about anything, much less a debate, if there's not agreement on the terms, particularly key terms like defund. In fact, Derek and Amir used the word defund in different ways. So we don't know what we're talking about here. To me, defund means stop the flow of funds, cancel funding, eliminate the budget, fire the officers, sell the buildings, sell the vehicles. Amir mentioned, referred to defund drastically. That's like being a little bit pregnant. Either you
30 seconds, unmute and keep going. Jeffrey, I need you to unmute again and then you can keep going for 30 seconds longer.
I would ask any of the pro-defund speakers to please define what they mean by defund. Otherwise, we have defund or not defund, and there's a lot of area in the middle.
Okay, so your question is how would Mr. Glover do that? Yeah.
And everyone else, how they define
Well, he's the only one who gets to answer right now, so he's going to be our answerer. Go ahead now.
Madam Chair, I understand the gentleman's perspective. I think there's a difference in dissolving and defunding. And I prefer the word reallocate our funds. I don't think we can get rid of our police force. I don't think that's smart. I think we need to find specialists within our police department. I think what we fail to realize is that our police officers are incredibly talented on a multitude of levels. If we could specialize in certain things. Meg said something that was right on my way of thinking, that we have specialists, retrained police officers so that they're competent in a multitude of things, so that when they do pull up, they have the training to deal with someone that may be mentally unbalanced, just to hold them off long enough for the experts to come. A lot of times our police officers are asked to do so much that they venture out of their field of expertise, and then it all goes crazy. So we can't turn our back on our police officers and tell them that they can't feed themselves. It's not fair. And not only that, we'll be in absolute anarchy, and that's not going to help anybody. But I think we should redistribute the money to do better.
Yeah. All righty. Wonderful. With that, the speaker is thanked. Jazz hands. Just excellent speech after excellent speech. I'm loving this. Doing really well. What the Madam Chair, the previous speaker said this. I'd like to ask him or her. I know that's a little bit annoying, but it's really important. So thank you for bearing with me as I remind you all of that. So we are now done with our prepared speeches and are going to shift to 3-minute speeches, and the floor is open. So I'm looking for a speech in the negative, and go ahead and raise your hand if you have one. Alrighty. Rachel Becker. You can unmute yourself. You have up to 3 minutes.
So my basic concept in saying that I do not think we should defund the police is that a lot of what's been said already, that we need the police, but also that as a social worker, I don't want to be the one responding to these calls. It is crazy going into a situation where you have no idea what's going on. And I am not prepared personally with the training I've received to deal with a lot of those situations. There are social workers who are trained more specifically for crisis situations than I am, but across the field, we're not necessarily trained for that. And my field is hugely broad, so there's diversity there. I do think that we need much better accountability within police systems. We need much better ability for police to be held accountable to the law. We also, I agree with the point that we need a change in laws. I feel like the police are really the tip of the iceberg. It is their job to enforce the laws that exist. And when the laws are not just in the first place, police are going to be doing unjust things. That's not the only reason they're doing unjust things, but laws, I mean, the drug laws are a great example of the many unjust laws on the books that are causing huge problems in our society. When racism is built into the legal system, into the laws of our country, it's kind of crazy to expect the enforcers of those laws to somehow function completely justly. So I think the problem is deeper. I think we need to look at the laws of our land and how to shift those. That gets me kind of into conversation with Amir here, because I agree with his point that the laws need to change. I disagree with his point that privatization is the solution. Exactly because of our criminal justice system, privatizing that system was disaster in terms of justice in this country. Systems that are built to make profit do not do a good job of serving people who cannot pay them. And that will always be a problem for justice. We have to have public programs because they have to have the basic fundamental belief in serving people equally, and programs that are based on profit will never have that belief.
All right. Are there questions for the speaker? Yes, jazz hands for the social worker. While y'all are raising your hands, I'd just like to point out that you guys are doing a fantastic job of sharing where you come from and making this personal, and also of responsiveness. I got to call out Nell in particular on that. You responded to like 18 different people. So good job to the whole group on personalism and responsiveness. It's part of why this is going so well. So for questions, Ron Snow, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
So, Madam Chair, I think the last speaker, it was interesting in the sense that she was against the defunding, and as the gentleman before her, the speaker before her, or the questioner had said, the is that aspect of what is the definition of defunding, but the speaker was open to different aspects of changing laws, social training, and some of those things were pointed out. I think one of the problems we have as a society is that we're sort of influenced from Hollywood, where we make sort of fun of the fact that a person brings a knife to a gunfight. Yet when a policeman arrives at a playground or stops someone for a bad turn signal or goes to quell an argument, they always bring guns. And
10 seconds, go ahead and unmute yourself and continue.
And so my question is that when police arrive in those situations, playground or whatever, they bring a gun, and what we've seen is that that gun goes off and kills someone. So maybe the demilitarization of the police is something that is part of that definition for defunding. And what would the response be of the speaker for that?
Go ahead, Rachel.
I don't think it works for police to not have guns if criminals are going to have guns. However, I went to a very interesting presentation in I live in a very small town of 3,000 people on the edge of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So literally we butt right up against the edge of the city. So I went to a presentation of the police chief of my small 3,000 person community, who does an excellent job of being incredibly human and humane in his policing and training his officers to do that. And it was encouraging to me in the midst of this whole conversation that policing can be done well when officers are really held to really good standards and trained well, and that's all enforced. However, the police chief said
10 seconds, unmute and keep going.
they have 5 levels of force. And the first one is just the presence of the police officer. That's recognized, just the physical presence of the body in uniform is recognized as a type of force. And the second is communication, right? And that's before you get into any weapons. And if all goes well, you never have to use anything other than those two. He shared that only once in his 12 years.
So I'm gonna have to ask you to just wrap up. You can finish your sentence. Unmuting, keep going.
Only once in his 12 years as chief has anyone needed to use the 3rd level, which is a taser. And at the time it was determined to be inappropriate and the police officer was fired for it. So when police is done really well, those guns stay in the holsters. So having the guns, I think, is necessary, but they don't need to be pulled out in almost any situation.
All right. Sorry, just have to enforce these time limits. Wonderful. So for the second question, people are raising and lowering their hands. Keep your hand up if you want to ask a question. We will go with Kristen Carlson.
Thank you. Well, I wanted to ask my fellow sister social worker about, somebody had talked about, you know, what would help reduce crime in the communities. And the 3 things that I, for years, wished that somebody would pay attention to are the high school graduation rate of kids in poor neighborhoods, and it doesn't have to be Black kids, it's all the kids. And then the out of wedlock birth rate, because which breaks my heart, because all the evidence, and again I go back to population health, all the evidence is that kids in a 2-parent family do way better than kids in a 1-parent family. And you know, I wish that we were paying attention to that, and Black on Black crime, which when I was for 6 months in Chicago, the things that broke my heart it was never a police officer, it was always the gangs.
10 seconds, unmute and keep going.
And I wondered what Rachel's thoughts would be for programs that would help, not be enough, because I ran 2 of those programs that people want to give more money to, and it wouldn't be enough, but they help.
All right.
So what thing that you'd like to see done?
She'd like to see, yeah. Go ahead, Rachel.
So much. I don't think I can delve into all of the many, many layers of social inequalities and injustice in this moment. In terms of, oh my goodness, I just lost my train of thought because I was trying to go too many different directions. So I have a good friend who lives in a community close to me, another very small town that happens to be a very high crime area. In fact, it was a place where there was a shooting of a Black person by the police about a year ago, leading to huge protests in Pittsburgh and other places as well. And so they did disband the police in that community, and it's been policed by the state basically, or by the county. And my friend who lives there says it's been a huge problem, because there was already a high crime area. He was talking the context of someone on his street getting murdered that week, and grieving that loss.
10 seconds. Go ahead, unmute and keep going.
And he said we don't need to not have police here. We need more police, because it's not safe here otherwise. And I want my neighbors to be safe. I want to be safe. My family worries for me living here. And so it goes back to, how do we reform the police? I think that would be my hashtag, would be reform the police without defunding or disbanding.
All righty, excellent. And with that, the speaker is thanked. Once again, somebody was just chatting to me that I think this is the best debate ever. I think we're doing really well, guys. So jazz hands for all of you. I'm now looking for a speech in the affirmative. Reminder, it's 3 minutes. And we will go with Mackenzie Crozier. Go ahead and unmute yourself. You have up to 3 minutes.
Hi, everyone. I guess we're going to introduce ourselves. So my name is Mackenzie. I'm a college junior. I'm from Michigan, and I go to school at Yale University in Connecticut. And I'm here actually because I chair a college debating society that looks quite a bit like this one, and you guys are all so much nicer to each other than the people I'm used to dealing with. Congrats. So I want to speak in the affirmative, but I want to speak with the idea of perhaps a new way of thinking about defunding the police. And the one thing that I want to think about is community control over the police. So what that means is that each individual community could be allotted the privilege to elect people to a committee, similar to how they would to, a town council or city council, and then say, okay, these are the people who now control the budget. And one of the ways in which this has been proposed, so this has been proposed by the Movement for Black Lives out of Minneapolis, and they actually proposed it as far back as 2015, basically after another murder of an unarmed Black man in Minneapolis in 2015. And one of the things I think is really exciting about this plan is that it allows individual communities to think about their relationship to the police. So in communities that are over-policed or have, heavy police presence and find the police to be unsafe or find the police to be difficult to deal with in their immediate community, can then go and say, okay, we're going to either, defund the police or abolish the police if they want to, but more likely, decrease funding for police and allocate that funding to other programs in their immediate community. And communities that don't have these problems can then decide later, okay, this is what I would like to have. And I would like to, increase funding for the police or keep police funding the same. I think the nice part about this process is, of course, it's unequal, right? You'd be walking into a different community, it'd be kind of weird, and perhaps not necessarily know what the cops look like there. I think, but the nice thing about this program, I think, is it allows democratic control over the police in a way that doesn't, we're not really allowed to have a say as American people about the police right now. I think this could be really helpful for certain cities in which the police budget takes up a massive portion of their city budget. For instance, Los Angeles, their police budget is 53% of their entire city budget. And it also allows us to think about what individual community needs are. This could also help by different measures.
30 seconds, unmute and keep going.
So one of the other measures that's thought to help with this is things like random selection. Just like you choose somebody on the jury, you would choose someone to join this committee, right? To be randomly selected members of the community who then could have democratic control over the police and then have a more accurate and robust understanding of what that individual community's needs are. Thank you. I yield my time.
Alrighty. Lovely. Are there questions for the lady? Mr. Steele, our frequent questioner, please go ahead.
This is a great idea from the speaker, and I appreciate the suggestion. But I am asking if the speaker is aware of community oversight committees that already exist for places in urban communities that have police forces, and if the speaker is aware of the defanging of those particular oversight committees having no real ways to really oversight, especially when it comes to police killings and the like, and also to find out how the speaker feels about the power that police unions actually have garnered over the years to actually build themselves up the budgets that they have. LA City proper.
Yeah, this is many questions. First one, police unions. I think that one of the major problems with police unions is that Mr. Steele is correct that police unions have a significant amount of power, and often that union organizing is really organized around police unions, regardless of whether they want it or not. Even individual, governments are beholden to police unions in the way that Bill de Blasio is in New York, right? In ways that are good or bad, but de Blasio ran on a platform of saying that he doesn't like police. So now why is he doing everything that the police wants, right? That's strange, right? So I think that's a problem. I think one of the other questions that Mr. Steele is probably pointing to is that I think that we're addressing a lot of broader problems that are going on with the criminal justice system, right? As long as police are being rewarded in some ways, whether it's like through awards, through increased pay or whatever, through quotas or benchmarks or predictive policing, all of these other practices, it's going to become really, really difficult for us to actually have a conversation about defunding the police when police are being rewarded for like making arrests. So that's a real problem.
10 seconds, unmute and keep going.
I think the other thing as well is like thinking about some of the things that were brought up earlier about decriminalizing things like recreational marijuana is sort of like a done deal at this point in some ways, but decriminalizing other supposedly nonviolent crimes and reevaluating what we think of as nonviolent, I think is really important, and also like looking at special privileges granted to police and the mass incarceration.
I'm gonna have to cut you off, but you can finish. Unmute and finish your sentence.
Yeah, which is obviously like a whole other question. We probably could have like 800 debates about this, but yeah.
Yes, I feel like a follow-up conversation is in the works there. Alrighty, further questions. We'll take one more question from Kirk Beck. Go ahead. Kirk, you can unmute yourself and, okay, there we go. Yep.
I was on the list for the affirmative, so I don't have a question.
Oh, so unfortunately, this is only a time for questions. Okay, so we will go to someone else for the second and final question here. Let's go with Robert Ullman.
Hi, I'm Bob Ullman. I'm from Palo Alto. We have a very good police department here, but they're not perfect. They've had a few negative events in their last 10 years that have been publicized and haven't fully been corrected. That's too bad. But anyway, I'm very sympathetic to the police department because my father was a New York City policeman, and I think he did a good job as best he could. He had a very good close hand with his people they worked with. But that was the 1930s and 1940s, entirely a different situation than we have today. But I think I agree that the police cannot be unfunded, obviously, because we need them.
30 seconds, and this is a question I gather. Go ahead, unmute yourself and keep going. So we still can't hear you. Go ahead and unmute yourself and finish your question.
There we go.
There we go.
My question is, how come the British can have police, two types of police, one with guns and one with not, and 90% of their crimes are with people without guns? And I'm sure the same is true in this country, even though we have a lot more guns. Most of the police do not have to attract events that have guns. And we should have nobody should have guns unless we discover that the criminal has guns, and then the criminal police force with guns can come forward. That would help a lot in the situation.
All right. Go ahead, Mackenzie.
Yeah, I think one of my concerns, of course, though, is that a lot of times people don't have guns and they're still getting killed. I think that's like, that's like the first like very obvious answer. But I think the, following answers, I think, we should really be thinking about, there's a big movement in our country right now to make sure that citizens don't have guns or don't have certain kinds of guns, right? But I think one of my problems with that is like, if we have unarmed Black men and unarmed Black women that are getting like disproportionately killed by police who do have guns, then I really am concerned about their ability to defend themselves, that they're not allowed to have guns too. Breonna Taylor, who was murdered in Kentucky recently, her boyfriend is currently being charged with attempted murder of a police officer because he tried to defend himself after the police officer shot his girlfriend to death. So I think like one of my real concerns about that is like, if we are going to have a police force that is like not using guns, then how do we think about that? And also a lot of these people are not being killed with guns. I think we really need to be thinking more about just like, what is excessive force? Guns being part of that, but not the whole story, right?
All right, very good. With that, the speaker is thanked, and jazz hands for our youngest speaker thus far tonight. All right, so this is this was probably predictable, but we're in a situation where lots of people want to speak and we are almost out of time. So I think what I'm going to do is something a little unorthodox, and we're going to go for a round of lightning speeches, and we're going to have them be 1 minute. We have 6 minutes until we do our debrief, so we're going to try to get in 6 short speeches, and we're not going to do questions. And this is, again, just in an attempt to get as many voices in as possible. And just so you all know, we have about 5 times as many people, particularly who want to speak on one side, as we have time for. So just know that we're doing our best with this. So I'm now looking for a speech in the negative. And go ahead and raise your hand if you want to speak in the negative. I see. Okay, these hands keep changing. Let's go with Gail Garrity. Speech in the negative, 1 minute.
1 minute. Okay, I'm from Maine. And you know, when I first heard that the protesters were calling for the defunding of police department, my first response was, can it get even more reactionary and polarized? Our country is more polarized than it's ever been before, and defunding the police will only polarize it even more. And it will result in more violence. Nell said the term defund wasn't right, you know, and I agree. But reallocating hasn't worked, at least according to the people who are behind this movement. And so I don't know, many, protest, there's a lot of division and polarization, and it's not the time to be really looking at this seriously. And is it a fair response to police officers who are good cops, who try their best to walk the line between enforcement and sympathetic empathy? I mean, we ask them to do so much now, and counselors cannot.
I have to ask you to wrap up. You get one more sentence.
Okay.
1 minute's very short.
Counselors cannot mediate a domestic violence dispute, and that encompasses a lot of the things that police have to do.
All righty, very good. With that, the speaker is thanked. We're moving on to our next lightning speech. Yes, jazz hands for sure. We can't forget the jazz hands. I'm looking for a speech in the affirmative. Julie Bowler, 1 minute.
Hi, I actually was on the don't defund the police side because I was thinking about community policing, training, adding evaluation teams to police departments to evaluate best practices and share across the country. And I think all of the social programs that need to be funded to help reduce crime are important, and just kind of an old fight that we liberals have been pushing for a long time. So I've been sort of pushed by some people around me to think about whether defunding the police is because the system is so broken. The paradigm is so wrong. The racism is so systemic that we have to immediately stop feeding it with money and take it apart and put it back together. And I would say to people that are afraid of the law and the lawlessness and chaos that comes from that, to remember that Black people are feeling lawlessness and chaos and fear right now. I don't know the answer, but I think it's important to think about that radical end of the spectrum.
All righty, very good. With that, the speaker is thanked. Excellent. Jazz hands for Julie. I'm now looking for a speech in the negative. David Miller. 1 minute.
Unmute. Hello. So my actual argument is to defund certain parts of the police, but not others. So fundamentally, I'm going to say we've been having this conversation about whether we should defund the police, and I think we've overlooked what the police are as an entity, as an institution. The NYPD I can speak about because I'm from New York City, and it has a lot of subdivisions. There's the SVD, which is a special victims division. There's the Counterterrorism Division, Patrolling Officers Division, the Detectives Division, the Aviation Unit, and so on and so forth. And they do different things. The Special Victims Division investigates sex crimes. We should definitely not defund them. The Aviation Unit has the helicopters, which go in and do rescue missions when people fall out of their boats in the Hudson and are about to die of hypothermia. The helicopters are able to rescue them. And when there's brush fires, they hook up the helicopters.
10 seconds, unmute and keep going.
And they drop them over the fires, so we should definitely not defund them. Counterterrorism Unit, probably a little bit overfunded, but we should keep them mostly funded. Patrolling Officers Division, maybe a little bit overfunded. So there's certain divisions of the police department that we should make sure are definitely funded, and certain divisions that we can probably shave a bit off their budget.
All right, very good. With that, the speaker is thanked. I am now looking, I'm so impressed with you guys, by the way, for like really going for the like super speedy version of this. So I'm now looking for a speech in the affirmative. Joe SoCal. Go ahead and unmute yourself. Joe?
There we go.
There we go.
Mistake. I actually am not for defunding.
Okay. Hang on one second. So you're going to go in the negative next.
Yes.
So we'll do our final affirmative speech, and we will do Kirk Beck. Go ahead and unmute yourself. You have 1 minute.
It's unusual. I'm for the total defunding of the police department. Why? Because we already have a sheriff. I live in a community of 190,000 people. We don't have a police department. We have a sheriff. And the sheriff is elected by the people and answers to the people. The police chief answers really to the city manager, who a lot of people don't even know who he is. We have a problem with overlapping jurisdictions. Police and sheriff are often working not so much together, but against each other. It's absolutely imperative for the American people to understand the constitutional role of the sheriff. You can't defund him. He is constitutional.
10 seconds, unmute and keep going.
As far as the police department goes, it can be totally defunded fairly quickly. Thank you.
All right, very good. With that, the speaker is thanked. All right, so for our final speech of the night, I'm sorry, folks. I know that a lot of other people wanted to speak. It's just we have, well, we'll talk more about this in a minute. We have more demand than we can actually meet right now. So Joe SoCal, will you take us home? 1 minute?
Thank you. Thank you. I am a former police officer. I survived the Black Panther movement, the formation of the Hells Angels, and the free speech movement in the University of California. During that time, there were a lot of marches, no riots, a lot of speeches, nobody killed. I think one of the interesting things was to be a police officer was very difficult. They wanted people with college degrees. They wanted a lot of information and education to become a police officer. I see today, almost anybody be police officer. I see the billboards, you know, join this department for X number of dollars, you know, 2 years of college. But education was a huge factor when I was with the department. We also had a group of community officers that did not carry weapons, similar to what Robert was saying in England, that works with two sorts of groups. Also, I want to compliment Nell on what he had to say, especially all his trophies behind him. But there's a lot of ways to do things. And I think one way is to look at internally as how they're getting the police officers and how we're training these people. I think that's the most important thing. I think that extra funding would go a long way to do that. Thank you. I enjoyed the conversation.
All right, very good. And with that, the speaker is thanked. So bravo, everybody. Jazz hands for sure. Because I'm a stickler for parliamentary procedure, we're going to adjourn properly. And what that means is that I need somebody to say, I move we adjourn, and then somebody else to say second. So no need to call on you.
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Great. Somebody say second. Great. All right. The meeting having, excuse me, the motion having been moved and seconded, we are adjourned. Okay. So don't go anywhere, because now we're going to do a little, there are two more things before we part ways. So first of all, give yourselves a big round of jazz hands, because that really was, I have to say, I think that is the best debate we've had. Really, really well done to everybody. And so we're now going to do just a little reflection. And it's, I'd like you to answer two questions. You can answer one or the other or both. What did you learn? And what did you like most about this? What did you enjoy? So go ahead and raise your hand, your little blue hand in your managed participants pane, if you have something. Wow, so many again. Let's start with Kathy from California. Kathy from Orange County.
Thanks, wow, got to speak again. My gosh, to me, I love in this time of division and not listening, I just love just the whole process. And I just think that this process and this very important subject, I'm learning so much just to apply it to a lot of subjects that are going on right now. So I just really appreciate that.
Wonderful. All right, great. Steph Garber.
Thank you. I like that it was very civil. It was so well conducted. I hadn't attended one of these before, but I would not hesitate to do so again in the future because of the way that it was done. It was very professional and very fair. And what I learned is that I did not know when people were speaking if they were left-wing or right-wing, because I think this crosses both ways. Thank you for having me.
All right, wonderful. Let's go with David Miller.
Hello. I like that no one called anyone else Hitler. I yield my time.
Cheers. Yep. Okay. Boy, you guys are such overachievers. We have more people than I might even be able to call on for this. Kristen, go ahead.
Thank you. I think it was Mr. Steele who said that we all can have something in common, no matter how much you disagree. And I learned that we all want high quality, fair, just policing in our communities. And that really, really warmed my heart, that we were all against racism and we all wanted justice. And how we go about doing that might, you know, we have different ideas, but that we all were for justice and nobody was trying to defend the actions of the police officers here in Minneapolis. That really, that helped a lot. What I liked the best, Mr. Glover, I would have to say I liked his speech the best, because he, I thought, had some great ideas on how to reform, and he sort of recognized everybody's pain in this, which I think is important. I think it's important for us to empathize with everyone's side, the side of the good police officers, the side of the good Black men who are, you know, hassled with having needed to be. I really thought this was fantastic, and I'm going to leave feeling very inspired. And I really pray that we all contact our government officials and make sure this reform happens, because it won't happen if we're quiet.
It's true. It's true. Jacqueline Brownlee.
Thank you. I enjoyed the debate also, and thank you for organizing this. It's great to have people talk and we understand each other's points of view. The thing that impressed me was the fact that there's very little emphasis on the impact of perceptions, the way people see the community. I noticed some speakers describe the community before they talk, as if it's the community that's bringing on all of this violence, or the state of the community. I'd like to suggest that it's more an understanding or perception of the people in the community. And if there was more emphasis on how to get people talking, just as we are police and leaders, not only leaders, but just members of the community expressing their opinions to each other. I think it'll make a difference in terms of perception. I listened to 3 generations of policemen from 3 generations, and all 3 generations experienced prejudice, harm during their police training. I didn't tell you, they were all Black policemen. So this is ingrained. It's what a person sees when they see a Black person. They see crime, or they see whatever is negative. And this is what we need to work on, is perceptions of each other.
Alrighty, very good. Also, I just love, this always happens, that we could keep going, right? Clearly. Thank you for that. Let's go with Linda from Oakland, California.
So what I learned is that semantics are really important, and the whole defund language is problematic. I strongly support it, and I think we've got some work to do in remessaging that. And then I also really liked hearing from a couple police officers. I thought that was very brave at a time like this to come forward on a debate, and I appreciate it.
Wonderful. Kay Halprin.
Yeah, thank you. This was a terrific event, a terrific debate. What impressed me most was that there seemed to be a lot of consensus, actually, and it wasn't so much, yeah, I think somebody else said it was difficult to tell which, quote, side they were on in the resolution when they were speaking, because there were so many productive ideas. And there was actually quite a lot of consensus, and I learned a lot. Thank you.
Wonderful. Let's go with JD Backus. Backus?
I just wanted to say that I liked the various points of view. I thought, again, the issue of how we define defunding is really critical, and I don't think it's the best term that's out there. The other thing as I'm listening to this, I'm thinking of my background as an educator. And there's so many same issues here where the role has expanded and expanded. I mean, what we're asking of policemen, what we're asking of other civic people, but educators. And the money to do all those things is so slim. And so I really think it's going to take educating our public to really understand the funding issue. I think a lot more training, just like, you know, the issue of keeping bad teachers on because of unions or whatever reason.
I'm just going to ask you to, what did you learn or what did you enjoy? Because so many people want to talk, but keep going.
Yeah, I just enjoyed so many different perspectives and good points made. That's it.
All right, wonderful. I can feel the energy of like more points wanting to come out. It's really good. Let's go with, gosh, you guys are such overachievers. We only have time for a couple more. Derek Steele, go ahead.
I'll be brief. I learned today that this particular issue has broken through the bubbles that social media or media has kind of put us in, to really start actually looking at the conversation in the most robust way possible as individuals. And that when we come to a space where the ground rules are set, we can have civil discourse and civil discussion about best ways to move forward. But I also want to say that I also learned that there's still a lot to learn about each other's experiences. And I think there were just a few assumptions based off of, again, someone mentioned perception. And when you're not exposed to those perceptions on a regular basis, you can only go off of what you know. And I think there's still more for us to learn from each other. So I appreciate spaces like this for us to be able to continue to do that.
Absolutely, yes. And for a final comment, you know, this has never happened before, that like there are like probably 20 people that I will not get to call on who want to say like how much they enjoyed this and everything they learned. So just to reflect that back at you guys. Anyway, Mackenzie, you got our last word here.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I really liked how much people were actually talking to each other in this debate. Sometimes debates go really poorly, and usually that happens when people are not really talking to each other or like effectively thinking about how what they're saying interacts with what other people said previously. So I thought that was really great. I was super excited to see that and see like that there was a real conversation happening. Something I learned, I don't normally have debates with people who are older than like 22. So I think that like it really kind of, I learned that I can in fact like talk to my parents about politics and have things go well. Hopefully talk to my other family members about politics and have things go well. So yeah, that's like, it's kind of crazy, but yeah, I normally my family mentions politics and I'm just sort of like, oh, subject change. So thanks for like inspiring me that like really good debate can happen, you know, across all ages and like realms of experience.
Yeah, well, oh, fine. There's one more person I'm being told to call on. Mel, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Oh, Nell, sorry. Go ahead. Yes. Mm-hmm. Oh, wait, you got muted again. Unmute yourself. There we go.
I wanted to post something, be very brief, and I want us to understand that we have to evolve our policing in this country. And think about this. They say that within the next 20 years, 45% of all labor in the United States will be done by robotics. So we have to retool our country, our kids and our people on how to make money, because when those people aren't working, will they resort to crime? So no matter what, we have to continue to evolve our police system for our personal selves and for the future. It's mandatory. I mean, as things change, we have to change as well. Thank you.
All righty. Now, could you give us just one little thing about like what you enjoyed?
I enjoy teaching kids. These are all my kids' trophies. We're winning this program in the state of California.
All right.
What I love about kids, what I love about kids is kids look directly at how you treat them. They do not care what you look like. And for every person, it's an opportunity to leave a lifetime impression on society by being the best person you can be to the children. We're gonna die, they're gonna have it. So, and that's how I'm trying to change the world, make my impact.
All right. God bless you. Wonderful. So I promised that this is only supposed to go till 10 Eastern, and so I'll do my best to get through the rest in the last 4 minutes. But first of all, I just want to say myself that this has been really wonderful. So thank you, all of you, so much for what you offered here. It was really, really good. And I just can't wait to, it just gives me hope. This stuff gives me so much hope for our country. Yeah, so a couple sort of final cleanup notes. The first is that I may have been, press were invited to this debate. And so if someone is planning to, a reporter is planning to use some aspect of your remarks, we'll make sure that they reach out to you. And for any reporter who's here, and Kieran, I can help coordinate that. So we'll get that taken care of. Second, I would encourage everyone, so if you're not a member already of Braver Angels, it's I think really worth doing. And so I will just say that the reason that I'm part of this is because I get to have experiences like this. Like, you guys just blew me away tonight, and I think that we can build something really strong here, and it can be so good for our country. And I was originally a skeptic of this kind of work a few years ago. I never thought I would work in this kind of, or like participate really in this kind of sort of bridging stuff, because I thought it was never going to change, honestly. But the more I see of you guys, and the more I see of all the volunteers that we talk to all over the country, the more I think that actually it can. And so I would just invite you to join us, be part of it. And you can do that at our website, which is braverangels.org. I'm going to share my screen real quick so that you can see it. So joining is super easy. You should be able to share my screen, or you see my screen rather, right now. And so the, sorry, I'm having a technical issue on my end. Can you see the Braver Angels homepage? Yes, okay, good. So you'll notice that on the top right, there is a support button. That's what you click on. It's very easy, click on that. It'll give you a couple different options. The cheapest is $1 a month. A lot of people generously choose to give more, up to you, whatever you can do, we would appreciate. But yeah, be part of this. And we need you, to be honest. And also, if you liked this particular experience, the debate team needs you. So our volunteers will tell you that there is actually way more demand for this than we can accommodate, which is why we put 200 people in a room and have, 20 or 30 people who wanted to speak but couldn't. We're trying to grow, but for that we need volunteers and we need staff. And so donations and any volunteering that you want to do would be appreciated. And also, anyone who's on the team will tell you it is the most fun team in Braver Angels. We have the most fun of anybody. So yeah, I'm seeing the jazz hands from the team members. Yes. So it'll be a good time. I encourage it. You can email me at april@braverangels.org if you're interested in either. And finally, we'd be super grateful if you'd fill out the evaluation form. We're always trying to get better. These big, like multi-100-person debates have only been going for a few months, since the pandemic hit, basically. And so, yeah, we're always trying to improve. Leslie kindly just put the link to the survey in the chat. And so I think it takes like 2 minutes, maybe 5. It's really pretty short. So if you'd fill that out, we'd be really grateful. And yes, I made it by 10, so I'm not even making you all late for bed. Thank you so much, everybody. This was really just a wonderful experience. And I love you all and very grateful. Go ahead and click on that link before we close this so that you can get to that evaluation form. I'm gonna give you a second to do that. All right, and we're good to go. So much love, stay safe, take care of yourselves, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.